50th anniversary celebration. Let's go inside and see what's going on. And here we are inside the lobby of Lunkin Airport. This was the original municipal airport and the largest municipal airport in the world at one time. Some famous murals are here in the lobby, and the one on the left shows how man had so much difficulty with transportation. He carried heavy loads, and even with the advent of the wheel and the stagecoach and the railroads, a heavy load was on his back. Now off to the right shows what happened with the advent of aviation, which lifted man out of the doldrums of transportation and carried him high into the heavens. These works were commissioned by the WPA in 1937 and show with excellent effect the city, the rise of man through transportation, and all the rest. This was, as we said, the municipal airport since 1927, and you'll see signs to planes and so on. And of course, it is here where American Airlines began, and several other airlines as well. And here we are out on the flight side of the Lunkin Terminal building, and this of course served as the main gateway to travel for many years. And the first flights originating out of here in 1926, 27 scheduled airlines going to Indianapolis, Chicago, and Cleveland especially. Several small airlines had their starts here and later grew into other airlines. Of course, American Airlines was the principal airline serving the area. Now, Lunkin Airport is situated on the banks of the Ohio and in the valley of the Little Miami. And it is completely surrounded by hills, and this, while beautiful, has prevented its growth into a major airport. You're taking a look at the new control tower built several years ago on toward the northeast side of the airport. And this has served faithfully and has the latest in modern control technology for the 120,000 or so takeoffs that occur here every year. You saw the original cab or control tower on top of the terminal building. Looking eastward now, toward the end of runway 6 and Beachmont Avenue, we see the surrounding hills that prevented Lunkin from growing into a truly international airport, although we have a runway of 7,800 feet that is big enough to handle the world's largest aircraft. The C-5 military transport has been here at Lunkin a number of times. As we pan across the Watch hills over here on the south side of the airport, the Little Miami River runs along the base of these hills. All right, now we have a venerable DC-3, a military aircraft, which of course the most popular aircraft ever built, and it is brought here for special display at this time. American Airlines, of course, flew many of these aircraft in its early days, as did other airlines. Side of the Ohio River and coming back around to our terminal building. Today we have many venerable aircraft here and popular aircraft. By the red striped tent you see a Cessna 195, and next to that a Stinson Gullwing. We have an Augusta helicopter just taking off and leaving at this time. Many life flights and service helicopters, as well as news birds and so on, operate out of Lunkin Airport. We've just run into one of the best-known dignitaries on the airport, and I can't help but introduce you to Tom Henry Noonan. How are you, Tom?
Thank you, Jack.
I knew you'd be out to enjoy the show.
Oh, absolutely. It's magnificent.
And could you tell us how long you've been flying here on the airport, Tom?
Well, I'll tell you, we can go back. I started in truly 1926, and I've been flying up to right now.
And I believe you were an operator of what they call a fixed base operation here. Isn't that true, Tom?
That is correct. I I started on the other side of Wilmer Avenue many years ago, and then we moved down to Hangar 1, and then we moved to Hangar 6.
I suppose you knew many of the early luminaries who made this airport and local flight famous.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Quite a few of them. Although today it was quite impressive. I talked to Paul Riddle, and it was amazing how Paul recognized me when I told him I lived in Wyoming. He said, oh, sure. He remembered well when he had a little field out there near Castle Farm on Reading Road in those days.
And I believe that was an airport out that way too, wasn't there, Tom?
Well, not really. It was just it was a kind of a grass field is all it was, and he made an airport out of it.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Tom. We appreciate it. We'll see you around. Let's take a look at the small museum that's been set up, especially for this event, and show you some of the reliquaries and things that have been originated for this event. And here we are at the Cincinnati Airmen's Club. This has been in business since 1937. It's the oldest aviation club in the United States. Hey, welcome to the FAA Flight Museum. And here we are today up in the Cincinnati Airmen's Club, and with many interesting displays of early Lunkin history. And I'm going to ask our cameraman to pan around the whole museum. Many supportive people have donated these fine photographs dating from Lunkin's very earliest days. People who worked on this display would be Roger Burdorf and Kathy Shermer, Sharon Stoltz, and others. The Petro brothers. Since Lunkin was the scene of early airline aviation, we have a retired pilot sitting here in full regalia who is sportive to the point of being really rakish. Folks, this is a model of the new Beech Starship, and this is what they call a canard design with a short wing in front and big winglets on the back, and driven by two fan jet engines, which will be turboprop. Notice that the vertical stabilizer is downturned. This ship has been certified and will soon be popular in America's skies. I see a gentleman here who has a patch from the 8th Air Force and the 100th Bomb Group, and I'm going to ask him if he actually served with that group.
Yes, I did.
That's fine. Were you in England with the 8th?
Yes, in England. Yes, included 34 missions out of England. We were shot down over Mersburg on July 29th of 44 and spent 9 months in POW camp, Germany.
What POW camp were you in, sir?
Stalingrad 4 and 1.
I see. And your name?
Frank Bushmeyer.
And where are you from, Frank?
Stars Park.
Right here in,
right
here in Cincinnati.
Here. Right. That's correct.
Are you enjoying the visit here?
Oh, yeah. We always do.
And you're seeing many mementos of the Air Force you knew?
Here. Yes, I did.
Now, did you join the Air Force early on or after the war started?
Beginning of World War II, yeah.
Okay, and you're retired now?
Well, sort of, yeah.
Well, we enjoy having you here, and thanks for showing up in that very representative uniform.
Thank you.
Taking a look now at some of the mementos that have been donated for this exhibit. Paraphernalia, emblems, and badges worn by flight personnel. We have some interesting things here from American airliners, and these have all been carefully cared for by people who own them. There are calendars and mementos of all types. We're looking now at a new master plan for Lunkin Airport, Alternative 5, which is being planned to improve facilities here, add more aircraft servicing since we have a lot of flights out of Lunken. Directly above the drawing, you see a splendid aerial photograph taken from about 12,000 feet, which shows in detail the splendid runway layouts. Here is the newest runway, our 7,000-foot runway, what we call 20 left or 2 right. And here is the terminal building and the other support buildings. Interviewing one of our potential future aviatrixes. And Liz is about 2 years old, and she enjoys coming to the airplane and to see the airplanes. Do you like airplanes, Liz? How would you like to be a pilot when you grow up?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, directly above us, you see an airways chart that's used to plot air courses all over the United States. And whenever we travel, we professional pilots always plan our courses and file flight plans according to these electronic pathways in the sky. And no celebration is complete without a feast. And our friends from the Sky Galley, the famous Lunkin Airport Inn, are busy preparing a feast fit for a king here, being served outdoors in a tent. And doesn't that look luscious? Here we are in the tent of the Gray Eagles, a formidable organization of early flight pioneers. And I have with me today Mr. Paul Verkamp, who's been flying around here and in the air since 1942. Paul, are you an original Cincinnati pilot?
Well, yes, I started flying at the old Parks Watson Airport up in Blue Ash. And from there, we came down to Lunkin about 2 or 3 years after that. So we've been here just about ever since.
Now, you're talking about we. Were you part of a club or an organization, Paul?
In the beginning, yes, it was a club, and then I found that it worked out much better to have just one partner, so we owned half a dozen airplanes just with one partner.
Paul, you mentioned half a dozen airplanes. Of those airplanes, what was the most exciting, interesting, or scary of these airplanes that you flew?
Well, I wouldn't say any of them were scaring. I've had a very nice life of flying over the years, and I guess one that I enjoyed more than any of the others would be the old Stinson Voyager. It was a 4-passenger plane, only did 110, 115 miles an hour, but you could go in and out of any field. I mean, my brother and I used to take it and go in these fishing spots, even if it was just a farmer's cornfield, you know.
The FAA wouldn't approve of those things nowadays. As I'm sure you'll agree, nowadays everything is procedure and rules and limitations.
Quite different today with these transponders that have to know just where you are and your altitude and all. In those days you went where you pleased and when you pleased.
Of course, I flew in those days too, and one of the things I find comforting about today's control is when you're in a thunderstorm and you wonder what you're doing up there, when you hear the controller say, "We have radar contact," that makes a person feel real good, don't you think?
It certainly would, but I hope I would never get in a situation like that. Closest thing I came to it, I was up in Michigan near Lansing one day, and the radio check, I just called ahead, and he says, "We do have a tornado in the area." So before I got the plane on the ground, I was soaked. It really came down hard.
Oh, well, that gets to you sooner or later when you're flying in this country. Because there's a lot of fine weather in the Ohio River Valley, isn't there?
Yes, there is.
Well, we're glad you came down here and that you gave us these little bits of information, and I hope you continue to enjoy flying for a long time to come.
Well, thank you so much.
Thanks, Paul. Boy, now this is living, folks. This is what flying is all about. I'm standing in front of a Ryan PT-21 trainer with a 7-cylinder radial engine, and this is the kind of thing that we learned to fly early in the Air Force. When I started in 1939, this was really hot stuff. And you know, this particular aircraft has a feature that is just now being adopted by modern aircraft. Notice this knee action landing gear. Makes landing real nice and easy, and some of the latest Cessnas have the same knee action landing gear today. Now, this particular aircraft has been cared for lovingly, and I wished I owned it. Don't you? And folks, you're looking at a group of very easy, and that means they're very easy to fly, canard aircraft. And if you're surprised that there's no front wheel on them, they just set them on their nose for stability when they're parked. Notice, if we have these gentlemen pick up the front end of this aircraft, a small wheel emerges and you can taxi and fly down the runway. This particular one has a 2-seat capacity and we can do about 175 knots. You can cross the United States in a day in one of these. Now, isn't that remarkable? Now, I've never flown in one of these, but I'd like to. All right, folks, here we are with Dave Robertson, who owns this canard, and he happens to be a fellow pilot of mine right here at Lunkin, and we're pleased to see you, Dave. Now, did you build this unit yourself or buy it?
I built it. It took about 5 years or 3,000 hours. It's made of fiberglass and foam and epoxy resin, and is designed by Bert Rutan, who designed the Voyager.
Right, he's very famous, and in fact, the Beach Starship is takeoff on this very design, isn't it?
Right. Yeah, it has the winglets on the canard, so it's an outgrowth of his work on this.
Bob, Dave, excuse me. It seems to me that when you're landing, you've got to be very carefully about putting the nose wheel down. Isn't that true?
No, you land in a 3-point attitude, a tricycle gear. You tend to land slower. You land with the canard up, and it somewhat blanks out your view of the runway.
Oh, I suppose so. Well, I remember my own old tail dragger days when some of the big radial stuff I flew, you couldn't see the runway at all, and we had to zigzag down the runway in order to see where we're going. Do you have to do that with this unit?
No. You only are blanked out for about 30 seconds or so, and if you're lined up with the runway, you know where the runway is.
I hesitate to ask you this question. How much do you think this unit cost exclusive of your personal time?
I've got about $20,000 into it. Part of it is the radio and Loran and transponder and the instrumentation, but in the actual plane, probably $14,000 worth of material.
Well, I'm sure you're going to enjoy a lot of happy flying, and thanks for telling us about it, Dave.
You're very welcome.
Right, bye. And no air show would be complete without looking over an old biplane. Now, the reason for 2 wings, of course, is to give added lift and more control, and this is the design that was evolved primarily during World War I, when you had to move fast to get out of the way of the enemy. And ever since that time, biplanes have been utilized for air shows and for aerobatics. 2 wings give you more lift and more control, and you can fly slower and you can maneuver better. So this is a very popular aerobatic airplane. This is a factory built, and this is a Pitts, and this is an S2A, I believe, and it holds 1 pilot. It is one of the most famous aerobatic airplanes ever built. And here we have the Black Sparrow, a famous World War II DC-3. Over thousands and thousands of these aircraft were built. They're powered by Pratt & Whitney and Wright Cyclone engines and Hamilton hydraulic propellers, and can carry about 26 people. These things were famous because you could take off at almost twice the gross weight, and often did, and they flew all over the world and still do. Many are still in service in foreign countries. I've gotten out of a few tough scrapes myself, or been brought out of some tough scrapes with aircraft of this sort. And now, folks, we're looking at a very venerable airplane indeed, the famous Cessna 195, which got a radial engine, carries 5 people, and was the predecessor of the famous Model 100 line, the 172s, the 182s that you see today. This airplane, I would guess, was probably built in about 1946, 1942, and 1952, excuse me. And it has quite modern flight instruments, and it's a joy to fly. These aircraft are very stable, have a good rate of climb, and I wish I owned an airplane like this. It's powered by a radial engine, and it's a tail dragger, so you have to be good at 3-point landings. And I have with me here now Mr. Russ Brinkley, who has come all the way from Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, to join us for this celebration. And Russ says he was 60 years late in getting here because he planned to be here at the first dedication in 1927. Now, why did you miss that?
Well, I was editor of Air Transportation magazine in New York, and we printed, it was a weekly, and we printed on Thursday ordinarily. The publishers, or rather the printers, followed us up, and we were a day late, and I couldn't leave New York to come down here for 3 days because we had to be in the mail by Monday, so I missed the whole thing. But we had a publicity man around here, Charlie Plank was his name, and he was our correspondent. He kept me in touch with everything that was going on, and those were great old days in the aviation business. Lunken's come a long way since then.
It sure has. Now, you're also a member of the Silver Wings, I see. Can you tell us what that is?
Well, I organized that 30 years ago. That I originally had the OX5 Club. You may have heard of that. I had that for 3 years, and due to some certain changes, I organized Silver Wings. This is our 30th anniversary, and John Paul Riddle and we have a great number of people around here. John and Paul is in Florida now, but we have quite a number of people here, and we have our own chapter here, and I come over to take place at our local head is racing out in Reno today, for Don Fairbanks, and he's racing his airplane out there. He races every year, but this is the final year he's going to retire his airplane.
Okay, well, I happen to know Don Fairbanks very well. Now, when did you make your first flight, Mr. Brinkley?
1927.
1927, so you've been flying for 60 years. You've got me by about 7 years.
Well, I was sort of brought up with it. I lived in Pennsylvania, in a town named Clarion, Pennsylvania. It was on the old original airmail route, and I got to know all the people out there. I was working on a little weekly newspaper. I was the only reporter they ever had, and I would get out the airport. The airport was a cow pasture at that time, and I'd get out there every day and got to know all of the original airmail pilots. There are only 2 or 3 of them left now, and one of them is 96. E. Hamilton Lee. Of course, he knew Cincinnati, but not from flying in here on the airmail. And a lot of the boys that used to be around Cincinnati, I've run into them in the airline. Of course, they're all retired now. Back in the old days, I used to deadhead, when I was editor of the magazines, I used to deadhead on the airlines. Can't do that anymore. The government clamped down on that. But I've managed to get in on a lot of others. I'd buy a ticket, but I'd be riding up in the jump seat or something like that, which has been a lot of fun.
Do you still fly occasionally, Mr. Brinkley?
Oh, yes, well, I've had a little problem with my eye the last few weeks, and my physical is ready to expire, and I don't want to go up and try to renew it now for fear I don't pass. But once you can't get past an FAA examiner, particularly at my age, well, then you have a lot of trouble because they put you through the mill from then on.
I know that, and I'm even younger than you are, and I have trouble getting by, and if they find your hair is parted wrong, why, you've got a lot of explaining to do, right?
They better like your necktie or you're out of luck.
No, those are hard words, but we love the FAA, don't we? Because they get us out of a lot of binds. It's been the nerve center of aviation for Cincinnati. All flight plans for general aviation are registered through here, and they have full radar and weather coverage and reporting here. And I can say from my own experience that there's a lot of times when I was mighty glad they were here, when I could come and get their suggestions and helpful advice when I was filing flight plans. Not only do we have an opportunity to make out flight plans here, but they give us complete weather briefings. They bring us up to date on other airports and what the weather is. And this important looking console back here toward the back is a place where regular weather reports are originated that play over the local KIS radio, and I believe that's Kentucky 142 that you broadcast that on, as well as the Cincinnati Beacon. And these are updated whenever the weather changes so that pilots can tune in and get a weather report even without coming to the FAA and the flight service station. We appreciate the service these people are giving us, and I can tell from personal experience that if they ever move this flight station, well, we're all going to miss it sadly. Good. I understand there is a move afoot to consolidate this into one of the new automated flight services. Is that correct?
That's affirmative. We're moving on October 4th, and we're going to be consolidated into Dayton.
Okay, and how will that affect me as a pilot that lives right here, who depends on you daily? What do I do in the future when I want to fly, and a flight plan and weather briefing and all that?
Well, now what you're going to have to do is you're going to call up to Dayton, and they're going to be able to process your flight plan, give you all the information that you would need as far as your weather briefing through the facilities up there. They've got new modern equipment. There were new expanded computers so that they can give you the latest weather through that right over the phone. And they're going to have a toll-free number that you can dial throughout the state.
Okay, that's fine. Now, that all sounds wonderful. But I mean, I like face-to-face contact. And all this automation stuff is great, but I like to see somebody's face and talk to them alive when they're giving me a weather briefing. We'll miss you guys.
Thank you. We'll miss you. You know, we'd like to stay around too, I guess. You know, but with the new expansion, the new computers, they call it progress, and so we're going.
I understand all about progress. Thank you very much, and good luck to you in your new assignment.
And I'd like to reiterate, we certainly do appreciate the help of all the volunteers to get this event off the ground and running, but certainly without their help, none of this could have occurred. But I'm not going to waste your time talking. I have with me the most distinguished gentleman I've met in a long while, Mr. Ebby Lunken, whose family, of course, had the foresight to make all of this happen. Without the efforts of the Lunken family, there probably wouldn't be an airport of this magnitude anywhere within the city limits of the city of Cincinnati, that's for sure, maybe not in this region. So with that, I will introduce Mr. Ebby Lunken.
Thank you very much, Ed. You know, this airport has been dedicated and rededicated so many times that I don't know exactly who it belongs to. But anyway, some 60 years ago, a group of Cincinnati dignitaries representing the far-sighted citizens of Cincinnati donated this parcel of land to the city of Cincinnati to be used as an airport. And that act established and put Cincinnati on the air map of the world. And since that time, there have been many, many people and many, many factions that have made this airport the great airport that it is. It has a heritage and a greatness that very few airports, and I've been to an awful lot of them in this country, but this one's sort of unique in its own way. Some of the great pioneers that were responsible for a lot of this were guys such as Major Hoffman, Al Wonder. Pardon me, I'll take a few notes here so I don't forget a lot of them. Ike Vermillion, Happy Wiedekin, Max Schmidlap, Bunny Hinch, and Paul Riddle, who is here with us today. There are many, many more that followed in their footsteps and continued the tradition here at Lunken. We had a lot of airlines operating in here at one point. There was Mason and Dixon. Embry-Riddle was the first one that had an airmail route from here to Chicago. And out of Embry-Riddle emerged American Airlines. There was Universal, Marquette, and TWA, and Delta. And then in later years, they all moved over to Boone County. We had a lot of aircraft manufacturers here, not a lot, but they were pioneers in the aviation construction business. We had metal aircraft, which was made the Flamingo. We had a Ronca, which you're more familiar with. There was an outfit called International out here in Gates Mills. They made a peculiar biplane, which was an octagonal-shaped fuselage made out of plywood. I don't think it lasted very long, but it was made here. There was also the Crosley Moonbeam, one of the few airplanes I never had the privilege of flying.
Thank you, Mr. Lunken. Now it's my pleasure to introduce to you all Mr. J. Paul Riddle, who is, as most of you know, one of the founders of the Embry-Riddle Company, founded on this airport back in the 20s. one of the earlier, airlines formed in the country. Mr. Riddle was here until the early 30s when he headed for different climes, but I'll let him tell you all that. It's my distinct pleasure to introduce Mr. J. Paul Riddle.
Thank you very much, but I got to assume a lot of things to follow Eddie, because his father and grandfather, his father in particular, was one of the closest friends I've ever had, and he did as much or more than anybody else to help them a little get going. Mr. Lunken, Mr. Charles A. Haynes, Colonel Proctor, Procter & Gamble, Mr. Jack Patterson, whose widow is here with us today too, and I would like to just have her stand up for a moment and say, Marie Patterson. Her husband was terrific. Yeah, everybody can remember his Jack. He was in the First World War, and then he was the Osk Escadrille in Russia. But you mentioned it, he did. He did about everything. So I came here as a kid about in 23 first, and I had a passport out of Ashland, Kentucky. I just gotten out of flying out of school in the government. And Cincinnati, 600,000 people, had hundreds of airports, I assumed. So I took this fellow coming down here. I couldn't find a place to land, except some kids were playing polo. I mean, the Fleischmans and the Lunkens and some of those people out here. And I waited a little bit and landed on the field. They didn't like that too much because the skids did a little bit, but they were nice and put me over in a turkey in a clover field next to it. And just an interesting thing is all of those people became stockholders in Embry-Riddle later on. Most of them learned to fly with us. See? Well, there's just so many things happened that changed my life completely. I look upon Cincinnati as a home. I started here in 23. I was there for a year or so, but in the meantime I stayed till 32 when I left, and then I left American Airlines when E.O. Cord got control. And then I went from New York to Florida, started Embry-Riddle over again there, and there we grew and grew, and we were the largest private contractors for the U.S. government for training of any outfit in the world. We had tech schools, we had 4 primary flying schools, 1 advanced flying school with the British. We had about 750 flying instructors, so you can imagine how many students we had. Then they decided that Brazil needed some help, so we put a technical school down there on the 22nd of November 2043, and in 3 years we trained some 4,000 technicians and left 4,000 in the school. In the meantime, Embry-Riddle had come full circle. A lot of the people in Embry-Riddle didn't realize they started in Cincinnati, and I couldn't believe why until I found out one of Mr. Hunt's secretaries, he was the president of the company, was from Erie, Pennsylvania, and I was up there 2 or 3 months. So she got it going, we started everything in Erie. And we've had to change that down because we started in Cincinnati and we're here for years. In the meantime, Embry-Riddle has grown again, become a full-fledged university now with all kinds of courses. We have a campus in Daytona Beach, Florida with 5,500 students on campus. The people that I have received that came in as a guest to the city and made me feel like I owned the place almost. I don't, I assure you. But it really makes you feel good to come back home and be a part of it. See? I'm looking out here at a little girl, Martha Lunkin, who I hope she gives me a ride in her yellow Cub. That's her yellow Cub here. And I haven't had a ride in one of those since 1942. See? And we had so many of those at one time, I couldn't tell you. We must have had 50 or 60 of them flying around. See? We did most of the training in the Air Force with the steermen, but in the military, in the civilian part of Embry-Riddle, we use the Cubs and Wacos and others. I want to thank you. I want to thank everybody here. And I hope that Embry-Riddle can do a better job than we did before. And I'm sure that the people here will take it to heart like you did before. Thank you very, very much.
And here we are, folks, at the end of another successful flight. And no flight is really successful until you come back to the Sky Galley at Lunkin Airport, where all good flights end. And we're enjoying a little libation here, and as you can see, the Sky Galley has a few folks in it who are joining me in celebrating the 60th anniversary of Lunkin Safe Flight. And we want all of you to visit Lunkin whenever you have a chance, and I'm sure you'll enjoy it. Support general aviation, the true lifeblood of American business. And Lunkin Airport, which is one of the nerve centers of Cincinnati, certainly, will esteem you and appreciate it. Thanks a lot now, and have a good day.